And I don't just mean unreasonable demands for control, but what I would argue are immoral terms that actually punish conservative content creators on behalf of big tech.
Good Lord, there is quite a feud going on. Steven Crowder is absolutely pissed, and he's trying to rally the troops over his disgruntledness on some conditioned terms in a $50 million contract that the Daily Wire offered him. We're going to cover some important details of this. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom lover friend, where we usually like to call out the lies, hypocrisy, and corruption of tyrants and highlight the amazing work of other freedom fighters. Now, I wanted to do this video on Steven Crowder versus the Daily Wire because I consider them both to be great freedom fighters. I love Steven Crowder. I love the Daily Wire. There is a major disconnect here in their $50 million contract negotiations. Steven Crowder came out, put out a video calling out conservative companies who are doing the bidding of big tech, saying they're really hurting the movement, encouraging people never to sign such agreements. The guy is pissed. So I wanted to cover this because I think it's important. I have some perspective and I have a very firm opinion about who's right here. And I was doing a live stream this morning. I'm having people ask me all the time about this. I'm like, well, I do have something to say. I think I have some unique insight about this and kind of like what's right in this situation. And I'll share my firm opinion in a second, and I'll also share why I have come to the conclusion of that firm opinion about who's right in this situation, Steven Crowder or Daily Wire. First, quick context. Steven Crowder, a couple days ago, put out his, in a way, scathing video. Saw a clip of here at the beginning of this commentary, and it's got over 1 million views. And in that video, he didn't name the Daily Wire as the company, but it's come out that it was the Daily Wire he was talking about. Mainly, we know that because the CEO of the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring, came out with his own video in response saying, yeah, that's us, the Daily Wire, and here's the contract we offered him. You know, you don't have to just hear about it. Let me show it to you, and I'll walk you through it. Each of their videos have well over 1 million views, Talk of the Town, and I wanted to share my insight on this because I think I have some unique insight and because I respect both parties. I love both parties, and the party that I think is wrong, I have no less respect for them. I love them. I want them to succeed. I just want to share what I think is right in this situation. First off, hats off to Steven Crowder for building this amazing empire of his, offering such great value, content, commentary, perspective, and comedy, where he gets put in front of him a $50 million contract for 4 years. That's amazing. Man, I'm inspired by that guy. I love it. Even though like he's obviously turning it down, I think that's incredible. With that said, who do I think is right in this situation? I think the Daily Wire is right. I listened to all of Steven Crowder's arguments, and really he's offended, he's pissed off, and he's really making accusations that the Daily Wire is just doing the bidding of big tech. They're not actually there being real conservatives. They're a bad influence. I think Steven Crowder is quite off the mark on his perception of this, and I think he's interpreting the contract in a way that's just not really based on reality. Though I will say, I love freedom, so I love Steven's freedom to interpret this how he wants and to share his perspectives. I love that, and I support the guy. I don't support his perspectives in this case, but I support the guy. I love him. So, Steven Crowder, his biggest discontentment with the contract. First, what was the contract? 4 years, the Daily Wire is basically going to be his exclusive publisher. And what that means is Crowder, for $50 million each year of those 4 years, he has to produce 192 episodes of his show per year. And in that, it's a 60-minute show broadcast on YouTube and Rumble, and then the last 30 minutes, so 90-minute show, first 60 minutes broadcasts on all the big tech platforms and Rumble, and then the final 30 minutes is behind Daily Wire's paywall. Then on top of that, he's got to do like a monthly Q&A session on Daily Wire Plus, exclusive content for them. He's got to do some piece of quarterly content, and then one special per year, either a comedy special or a documentary. That's the basically what he has to produce in order to earn the $50 million. So here's where he really got pissed off. In the contract, it stipulates that if Crowder is demonetized on YouTube, as in he gets a strike and his YouTube channel isn't monetized, he gets a loss of revenue. In other words, he gets a percentage of his payment from the Daily Wire reduced. And then also if sponsors that the Daily Wire secures to be sponsors on his show, if sponsors decide en masse to boycott Steven Crowder for whatever reason, if sponsorship revenue drops below 50% of the baseline, then Crowder gets a reduction in fee. And I'll show you the specifics on that contract, literally on the contract in a second. But that was the major point of disconnection with Steven Crowder. He said, oh my God, okay, so big tech, if they punish me with a strike, demonetize me, or if they deplatform me, then I get a major reduction in my pay. Daily Wire, that is just you doing the bidding of big tech. You're punishing me on behalf of big tech. I think that was completely off the mark. Why do I think that? The Daily Wire, yes, they stand for conservative values, as does Steven Crowder. Yet the Daily Wire, it's also a business. And it functions in a capitalistic society. Like, welcome to America. I love capitalism. A business basically says, hey, we're going to hire you to make us money. We're going to pay you money to make us more money. We want to cover your salary costs, and then we also want to make a profit on top of that. So we have money on our pockets and also money to pour back into the business to continue growing. I personally believe the terms of the Daily Wire's contract that they put in front of Crowder are very appropriate. Here's the reality that nobody likes. Crowder doesn't like it. Daily Wire doesn't like it. I don't like it. I don't think you like it either. Part of the reality is Steven Crowder, the talent in this situation, a lot of his content, if it were to run through Daily Wire, it would be distributed through YouTube. So the reality with YouTube is obviously they have it out for conservatives. There are certain things you can't talk about. If you talk about them, you're very much at risk of getting a strike, getting demonetized, and potentially even getting deplatformed. That is a reality of this situation. Like it or not, it's part of the reality. So part of the value that Crowder brings, obviously, is great content, but the appeal to an audience, a massive audience that wants to watch his content. So the Daily Wire says, hey, we're going to offer you not a little money, a lot of money, and we'll have rights to your content. And our plan is we're going to offer you a lot of money, but our plan is to use your content to make us even more money, to cover our costs, and then hopefully make a profit out of it. But part of the value you bring, dear Steven Crowder, is these millions of people that you reach every day on YouTube. There is a reality, the reality we don't like, that YouTube could shut you down. There's a reality that YouTube could demonetize you. And part of the Daily Wire contract is they collect the YouTube monetization. And if that were to happen, that shuts off a major portion of the revenue that comes to us. In other words, if Crowder were to say something to get demonetized, deplatformed, he's instantly bringing less value to the Daily Wire. It's a situation nobody likes. Crowder really didn't like it. So for me, the reality is it's very sensible that if there's an element of value reaching a massive audience on YouTube in this case, that is then taken out of the equation because it's out of your control, then Steven Crowder is bringing less value to the Daily Wire. Now, Crowder says, no, if I were to be deplatformed and a strike against me, you should pay me the same thing no matter what. And if you don't, you're just like big tech, you're doing their bidding. But to me, his perspective doesn't make sense if you're thinking like a capitalist. In my own personal life, I don't like to receive money for giving no value. If this was me in this situation and all of a sudden I was providing less value to the Daily Wire, I would not only expect, but it would feel better to me to have a reduction in pay because I realize I'm not giving as much value to the Daily Wire. So in my opinion, that's just a normal capitalistic business transaction. But from Crowder's perspective of, no, if I'm deplatformed and therefore a lot less people are seeing my content that you're trying to monetize, Daily Wire, you should still pay me $50 million. Maybe I'm only making you $5 million, but you should still pay me $50 million. How that occurs to me, and I'm sure this isn't what Steven Crowder intends, but how that occurs to me is just, it's kind of like a socialistic mentality of, if I produce less value, it's fine, I should earn the same amount as everybody else. But capitalism is all built on, when you provide more value, you get paid more. When you provide less value, you get paid less. Equity is all about, if I work or not, or provide less value, I should earn just as much as everybody else because I exist. But this situation would be massively different if, let's say, Crowder was working on a deal with Rumble. Difference between Rumble and the Daily Wire, Rumble is its own platform. The Daily Wire's business model utilizes other platforms. They utilize Rumble, they utilize YouTube primarily, and then podcasts. Whereas Rumble, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about content strikes. You don't have to worry about getting deplatformed. If the deal was with Rumble, there's much more security because Rumble is in complete control over you staying on their platform. If you sign a $50 million deal with Rumble, they are certain they are not going to kick you off their platform. So there would be no clauses in the contract where there's a reduction in pay if you get deplatformed. That's an entirely different business model. You're doing a deal with the platform. You're not doing a deal with the Daily Wire, who is a business that largely uses other platforms to bring revenue into their business. Rumble is its own platform. So I think if Crowder were in this situation with Rumble and the terms of the contract were the same and Crowder had the same disgruntledness, I think that would be very warranted. But that's not the deal. It's with the Daily Wire, who relies on their talent to distribute their content through YouTube and other platforms where there is a risk, especially a Daily Wire talent. They're conservative and big tech has it out for conservatives. So there is a risk that their content distribution is going to be handicapped. So let's take a look real quick at the actual contract. And this is a screenshot from Jeremy Boring's video where he was showing the actual contract. In this first part, this wasn't Crowder's major disgruntledness, but it's a meaningful part of the contract. If Crowder fails for any reason to deliver 192 episodes of his daily show, including any or all ad reads, etc., $100,000 reduction in fee per instance will happen. So that's basically if Crowder were to say, yeah, I don't want to do an episode today, then he would be essentially have $100,000 deducted from his pay. That one's hard to argue with. Crowder didn't really argue that point. Where he did argue is on this one, and then the next one as well. Ad drop. If Crowder is boycotted or dropped by more than 50% of his then extant advertising partners, and the company is not able to replace them within 90 days, then the fee will be reduced by 25%, his $50 million fee, until such times as that ad revenue has been restored for a period of 90 days. This is where Crowder gets pissed off and basically says, this shouldn't be there. I should be paid no matter what. Part of the Daily Wire's business model is, hey, you're doing a 90-minute show. So part of how we generate revenue to not only pay you, but hopefully make a profit on top of that. And we're talking $50 million pay on top of another $40 or $50 million in advertising production costs. That's a lot to recoup before you're even making a profit. So they're saying, we sell advertisers, 5, 6, 7 ad reads per 90-minute show. But if the advertisers, for some reason, decide to boycott you, we're going to have a lot less money coming in. Therefore, there will be a clause where you have a reduction in pay. And Crowder says, if that were to happen, I should be entitled to full pay no matter what. But in my opinion, again, how I look at the world, if the well that feeds the whole system is running dry through an advertiser boycott, it makes sense that I would be paid less. And this, as a contract, is an upfront agreement. If we signed a contract and then they sprang on me like, hey, we'd like to pay you less because such and such happened, that wouldn't sit well with me. But as part of an upfront contract, personally, I feel good about this. It's in integrity. It's part of capitalism. I would also bet there's a low likelihood of Crowder being boycotted from companies that the Daily Wire sells ad space to because they're going to be pretty value aligned. It would take a lot for a conservative company to say, hey, conservative Steven Crowder said something we don't like, we're going to boycott them. Daily Wire's not selling ads to woke Disney or woke women's underwear for men. The idea of this even happening is very remote, but the reality is it could. And I personally think that Crowder is missing the mark in this. He's viewing this as the Daily Wire is trying to penalize me. They're trying to punish me as an arm of big tech. I don't think that's really the case. And then the next part of the contract having to do with fee reduction that Crowder is really pissed off about is this part on ban. If the Crowder content cannot be released on any of the major platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because of Crowder or his content being banned from those platforms, then the fee will be reduced by as follows. If banned on YouTube, he gets 20% less. So if he were banned for the full 4 years of this contract, instead of getting 50 million, he would get 40 million, which I think is 20% or a 20% reduction from 50 million. If he's banned from Apple Podcasts, 20% reduction. Banned from Facebook, 10% reduction. Banned from Spotify, 10% reduction. I'm personally surprised that this clause, if he were banned by YouTube, I'm surprised that it's just a 20% reduction, because that's the major distribution platform where Crowder reaches his audience. Therefore, that's the major distribution platform where Daily Wire's ad revenue comes from. They sell ads to sponsors. That gets distributed on his YouTube show. So that's a massive loss of revenue. And again, I'm surprised that the contract proposed is just a 20% reduction from that 50 million if he were banned on YouTube. And then the other part that Crowder had a major issue with is over the course of this 4-year proposed agreement, Daily Wire would basically have control over Crowder's social media podcasts. So YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Not Twitter, not Instagram. They view those as personal expressions, whereas Crowder's content, his show, which is the value that he's bringing, it's majorly distributed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and then to a lesser extent, Facebook and Spotify. So Daily Wire would basically have pretty much complete control over those platforms of Crowder. So basically saying all that's going to be released on those is what we've agreed upon, your content show, as well as any kind of ads we want to do for merch utilizing your likeness or your ideas. And Crowder didn't like that. He's basically saying, you should have no right to control these things. But when you have no right to control these things, unless you sign a contract where you're selling control of them for this 4-year period. And it's basically like appropriate capitalist business transaction. You don't have to do it if it doesn't feel good. But if you do it, it's not the Daily Wire owning these platforms of Crowder's, it's them controlling them for the agreed upon period, which it's kind of like if you owned a house, but you don't live in the house, you might rent the house out for someone. They might sign a year-long lease. In this case, a 4-year-long lease. Now, during that time, you still own the home, and you're going to continue owning the home after the leaser moves out. But during that 4-year period where you're leasing the home to the leasee, yeah, it's the leaser, whatever, the person living in the home that you're renting it to, they control the home. Like they're paying you to have the right to use the house for the agreed upon period. And that's not a small thing. Someone with huge platforms like Steven Crowder, you're not easily going to give up that control, which, by the way, what's going to be published on it is largely you. So it's not like they're going to be publishing woke propaganda. But nonetheless, it's to be expected that they would need to have control over those platforms to have a relative security over bringing in revenue to recoup their costs and hopefully make a profit. But what I was saying with Crowder having huge platforms, you're not going to give anyone any level of control frivolously. And Daily Wire isn't proposing anything frivolous. They're proposing, like, we realize it is a major thing for you to basically allow us to rent your platforms where we're going to publish you for 4 years. How's $50 million sound? That's not a frivolous offer. It's not a frivolous demand. It is tens of millions of dollars in order to rent his platforms. And Crowder might say, that's not even worth it. Crowder might even say, like, there's not a number that exists that would allow me to give up any level of control. If it was me, and it was a value-aligned company, and it's my content going out, and or them running ads about merchandise based off of my likeness or my ideas, there would be a number where what I would agree to give up the steering wheel of those platforms as long as it's a value-aligned company publishing me. There's a number. To me, that wouldn't be selling out. To me, selling out would be a company or a business that I'm not value aligned with. I don't like what they do, and I'm worried they could use my platforms in a way to the detriment of humanity, putting out propaganda. Then for me, there's not a number in existence. But with a situation like this, yeah, there would be a number. And to me, that wouldn't be selling out. It would be selling out if it was, I don't really like what you're doing, but you gave me a big number, so okay, here's control. That's what selling out would be. And the last point of contention that Crowder had, and I think this is one of the more minor ones, we've covered the major ones. The last point of contention is he's saying, hey, during my 90-minute show, the Daily Wire wants me to do 5, 6, or 7 ad reads. So call that 7 minutes worth of ad reads distributed over a 90-minute show. He told his audience, I watched his video where he said, no, I've always made a pledge where I'll only do 1 ad read per episode. And I really don't know why he has that strong stance. You know, for a $50 million offer, you have to realize the capitalist company who is making you that offer, they absolutely have to make more money than what they're paying you. In order to cover Steven Crowder's deal, the estimates are $50 million deal, they would have to recoup $100 million just to break even because they'd be spending money on production and advertising, things like that. For me, it wouldn't be unreasonable as long as they are value-aligned companies that I'm advertising. Any sponsors that I have on my channels, I'm proud to share their ads with you. Now, if I have a 7-minute comedy video, I'm not putting 7 ads in that. I'll put 1 ad at the end. But if I'm doing a 90-minute video, then for me, it's like live in America. Capitalism happens. It's not a bad thing. If I'm doing a 90-minute stream, having 5, 6, or 7 ads in there of value-aligned companies, that's something that would feel just fine to me. It wouldn't feel like selling out. And obviously with Steven Crowder, he has a thing, which is great, like it's his choice, but he has a thing that only 1 ad read per show. That's fine. It's a limitation, but that was something he also really didn't like about the Daily Wire's offer. So that is the deal as I see it. A little bit of insider JP perspective because I've seen deals like this and I understand what it's like to be the talent and I understand what it's like to be the company because any deal I consider, I put myself in the company's shoes. And the last thing I want to do as a talent is get paid without delivering value. I have a sense of pride that I want to deliver actually more value than what I'm being paid for. But that's just me. Steven Crowder believes the Daily Wire is doing the bidding of big tech. He's called for a big rally of the troops where he's trying to paint the Daily Wire and companies like them into a really negative corner, saying they're not real conservatives. They're just out for money and they're worse than liberals, which were his words, not mine. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you think Steven Crowder is right, if you think the Daily Wire is right. I don't think there's any wrong way to look at this. I'm just sharing with you how I look at this. Last thing I'll say is, though I think the Daily Wire is right, I think Steven Crowder is inaccurate in his perspectives on this. I have to say, I love Steven Crowder. I love the Daily Wire. I support them both. Yet I'll also have my own logical discernment about the two perspectives involved in this matter. In this matter, I think the Daily Wire is actually accurate. With that said, all the love to Steven Crowder, all the love to the Daily Wire, and all the love to you, my dear freedom-loving friend. Hey there, my friends. Before you go, I want to celebrate. It is that time of year again when the elites and all the elected leaders of our world gathered at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is pretty much the Tyrant Olympics. So they're trying to decide how you and I are going to live our lives. I'm glad that they're doing this. I'm glad they're delusional enough to think they can control us. And I want to know exactly what their plans are, because I like to know exactly what dreams of tyrants to piss on with my liberty. Now, during this time when they're gathering and, telling us you should eat crickets while they eat filet mignon and caviar, I think we have one of two choices. You can either become more obedient or more brave. And in response to the World Economic Forum, I'm running a special sale on two special designs, which I think are the appropriate response for the World Economic Forum. The first design is pissing on the dreams of tyrants with my liberty. And the second design is telling the World Economic Forum exactly how obedient we will be with their plans for how we're going to live our lives. If you'd like to check out either of these designs during special World Economic Forum week, you can use the discount code WEF at my website for 20% off. That's awakenwithjp.com. Discount code WEF for 20% off. Good through the end of January. Suck it, World Economic Forum. I left my car running just because I can.